Wall of Grief and Love, the podcast. Welcome to the Wall of Grief and Love, a podcast about all things to do with the UK COVID Memorial Wall, half a kilometre of painted red hearts that runs from Westminster Bridge to Lambeth Bridge on the South Bank in London, commemorating those who have lost their lives to COVID in the UK. Each week, we'll be telling you a story about the wall, how it began, how it's maintained, and what it means to the people whose loved ones are commemorated there. I'm Lorelei King, a volunteer at the wall, and I look forward to sharing these stories with you. Episode 5: More Beginnings and an Ending. In this series, we've talked a lot about the origin story of the COVID Memorial Wall. But we can't tell the story of the wall without telling the story of COVID Bereaved Families for Justice UK, an organization started by Goodman and Matt Fowler. Jo, who lost her father to COVID early in the pandemic, gave an interview to a newspaper. Matt, who had also lost his father, left a comment on that article, and Jo got in touch with him. Unified in their belief that bereaved families needed a voice and their wish that others shouldn't suffer the way they were suffering, they started a Facebook page. And that page quickly grew to a group of thousands. What started as a bereavement support group evolved into a powerful campaigning force that was instrumental in securing the UK COVID-19 inquiry and, of course, in starting the UK National COVID Memorial Wall. I wanted to talk to these two amazing people. I asked Jo Goodman what she remembered about how the wall came about. At what point did the idea of the COVID Memorial Wall come to you? I know it was a co-production with Led by Donkeys. How did that kind of happen? Who approached who?
It's quite hard to remember the detail because it felt like it kind of happened quite organically. So I think we'd been within the campaign bouncing around, and even within the Facebook group, I think a lot of members were always trying to bounce around kind of ideas for ways that you could get people to engage with the scale of what was going on. And I think it felt like people could hear one sad story and think that's sad, but they couldn't get their head around the fact that there were tens of thousands of sad stories, different but the same in so many respects. And so there were all these things at certain points, like a football stadium, it's like this football stadium, it's like all the people at this festival, all the people at this concert, all those kinds of things. They kind of gave you an idea of the scale, but they didn't get you to engage with both the scale and the meaning. And I think what we were really searching for was something that would enable you to engage with the scale and engage with the fact that every single one of those losses was tragic, and we obviously believe in most cases preventable. We were kind of in that place where it was something that was a bit on the back burner, that we were always on the lookout for an idea for something like that. And then I think it was with that context, and maybe we'd mentioned something like that to Led by Donkeys. But anyway, at some point, I think they approached us and said, we've just had this thought about how maybe you might be able to kind of get people to really engage with it. But then at that point, it was a very loose idea. I think maybe it was an idea about a wall and something to represent people. And then we had conversations about what kind of symbol could you use. I think at certain points we were talking about handprints. And then I think it was concluded that that would be too fiddly to do. Then I think we kind of started talking about hearts. Then we got into the kind of conversations around there's yellow hearts, which is obviously, using a yellow heart as a way of memorializing COVID loss. I think once we got to the point where it felt like a heart would be a good symbol to use, we then went and had a quiet conversation with Yellow Hearts about, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? Led by Donkeys had said, yellow might not be as striking from afar because they kind of thought potentially red would be quite visible from the other side of the river, which is obviously part of why we selected that location. And then at the same time, Yellow Hearts said that they felt that it was probably better to kind of keep the two a bit separate so that anything that could be construed as a kind of political statement, something that some people would prefer to be kept out of Yellow Hearts.
How did you rally the troops? How did you get people? Because many volunteers turned up. Were they from our Facebook group? How did that happen?
Before that, even there was a big wobble, and I think I was the biggest wobbler because when we kind of came up with the plan, it then became clear that potentially this could be construed as criminal damage and we'd have to get people on board on that basis. So obviously we were asking people to take individual risks, which, we kind of concluded in the end that if we briefed people, it was up to people to decide whether to take that risk. Yeah, it was through the Facebook group. So I think what we did was we said, basically, we can't tell you what this is, but it is, I don't know what we called it, whether we called it a public art installation or we called it an action. I'm not really sure, but I think we said it's going to be in central London. We think that it's going to be a really important way of engaging people. I mean, it would require we need a lot of volunteers, but we also need to make sure people are informed because there is a risk involved. And yeah, loads of people were just like, yeah, I'm in.
You were there that first day, as was Matt, and you guys obviously had been communicating. The first day, when did you get there and what was the atmosphere like? How did you find that March 2021?
So I got there, I just started a new job, so I couldn't get the day off. I went down after work and I probably got there maybe 6 o'clock-ish. And I'd been following, obviously working very hard, but also avidly following all the WhatsApps, particularly at the beginning of the day when that was the point that it felt it was highest risk when because it always felt like once there was a decent number of hearts on the wall and there were people in there, tabards and signs were up and everything, it would start to get more difficult for anything to happen. Whereas when it was a couple of people painting hearts on a wall, it would be more risky. So I remember through the day this feeling of kind of almost euphoria building as it clearly was taking hold. And yeah, just seeing these pictures coming through of the hearts and the number of people, even just seeing the people together, I think was kind of an amazing thing. And like at that point, we'd met a lot of people. We all kind of knew each other quite well from Facebook and Zoom meetings, but actually seeing people kind of all together, albeit at a distance from each other, yeah, was just very powerful. And I remember getting down there at about 6, and I think it was kind of starting to be a bit dusky, and just seeing in that sort of light the wall stretching out, just feeling very emotional. I painted my dad's heart just across from Matt's dad's heart and dedicated it very, very simply. So it was before all of the more elaborate dedications had occurred. So I think I just put his initials in there. Yeah, just felt very special.
And do you get a chance to visit your father's heart or to see the wall much these days?
If I'm ever on the South Bank, I always go. And I've been at various points, obviously the anniversary and a couple of times to speak to journalists. I've been a few times also actually with people from the group who have been visiting London and have wanted to see their loved one's heart for the first time or dedicate a heart. I've had some really lovely messages from people. So I had someone who said that they'd really struggled with their children to get them to understand the scale and the tragedy, and that they'd taken them to the wall and something had just clicked in their brain and they'd been able to talk about it and understand it, which I thought was amazing.
I love the story about the children because I think the it is easy to understand that visual representation.
The first thing that you're struck with is the scale, but then when you walk along, there will be certain inscriptions that will just get you. And I remember actually that's one of the things when we were having the initial conversations with Led by Donkeys. I said, we're going to need to find a way for people to personalize the hearts, because as soon as there are hearts on the wall to represent the numbers, people are going to want to dedicate them, and it's going to be absolute chaos. We're going to end up with so many sort of duplicates, so many people frantically asking everyone that's there to put names on, and it's going to end up feeling unfair to people who aren't in London. So, like, we need to just have some kind of system. And I remember looking at my phone and seeing all of these people filling in the form requesting a heart and being like, knew it. But yeah, also it just so it was it was very stressful in the early days, because I think people saw it and they just wanted their loved one's name on it immediately. And I think we got just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of requests. That was probably the most stressful part of the early days.
I think we've been visited by the Commission for Commemoration a couple of times, and they are going to be giving the recommendations. And our hope, of course, is that the wall becomes permanent. Is that your hope for the wall? What do you see as its future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be devastating for all of us to see it go now. And I think it it has just become such a profound piece of imagery for the pandemic. And I think there is a reason why it's so often used as a backdrop for news stories, because I think it does encourage people to engage with the humanity of the people lost, because I think numbers are so impersonal. And I think that there could be, I think there should be a number of memorials, and there should be memorials all over the country. And I think there are people who are going to find different sorts of memorialization meaningful. But I think for so many of us, I just think that wall is something that memorializes people, but I think it also kind of is a bit of an anchoring point for us all. I don't often actually go to my dad's gravestone. I mean, I don't live in the same city as where he's buried, but and I do live in the same city as his heart on the memorial wall. But it's funny. I feel like I actually really like where he's buried, and I find it a very peaceful place to go when I actually go. But I don't think he is there. But I do find it comforting thinking that's the place, I can go there. But I also find it really comforting. My dad was a Londoner, and I do really, just on a number of levels, like, I just love that there's a little tiny, I can't remember how many centimeters the regulation hearts are, but that there's a patch however many centimeters squared that is hopefully forever my dad. Or and and I also just love that he is there with all of the other loved ones that people lost, and that there is something that kind of ties them together, rather than scattered graves all over the country being the only. It means something to me that they're all, I know that they're not all up there on the wall, but I kind of like to think that me and Matt's dad, my dad and Matt's dad are kind of, hanging out on the wall and pulling faces at the people on the other side of the river. It comforts me in some way.
I love what Joe said there. I think a lot of us are comforted by the fact that our loved ones are remembered together on the wall. The very first heart on the wall was painted by Matt Fowler in memory of his father, whom he lost to COVID in 2020. I asked him how plans for the wall grew out of the campaign.
We actually started talking about this. It would have been around about October or November 2020. What it was trying to gain public support and then political support was really difficult for that sort of initial year for the campaign. A lot of the time, people seemed to be agreeing with what we were saying, but nobody was really sort of helping to put any weight behind it. And we'd been talking about trying to do something that would be eye-catching, that would stir up some attention, stir up some noise. So we previously worked with Led by Donkeys to produce a film that they projected onto Big Ben. It was really cool. And I think if you're going to talk to anybody that is good at making that sort of political noise, you're going to go to Led by Donkeys. We contacted them and said, look, we're looking at trying to do something, but we're not sure exactly what. Originally, we were talking about maybe doing a sort of billboard campaign or something like that. And James and Ollie, who we've been talking to, said, hey, give us a sec, we'll come back to you on this. And they went away and they came back and said, well, how would you feel about some sort of big art installation? And we said, oh, that sounds great. What have you got in mind? They said, well, we think something that's going to be big and eye catching, somewhere, where people are going to see it. We settled on this idea of doing hearts to represent the COVID bereaved, to do one for each person who died, which was a frightening number already by then. Sadly, has been only increasing number ever since. And then we sort of looked at where the best places to put it were. So yeah, it sort of started around that sort of October, and I think by the February we'd had a pretty good idea about what it was that we wanted to do and how we wanted it to look.
And how did you corral the troops to actually make the wall, to actually paint the hearts?
That was an interesting one. I think because everybody had been cooped up inside for so long, and I mean, we were planning this during the time when you still couldn't have any sort of any gatherings or meetings. It was before you could have the gatherings of up to 6 outside. I think there's a lot of that sensation of people being sort of isolated, which I think that was both sort of physical and psychological that a lot of people were experiencing. And then to talk about what it was that we were trying to do, and eventually when it was decided where we were going to do it, there was a lot of appetite from people within the group to contribute to that. It was an opportunity to bring people together for something really positive, especially after so long unable to do it, and then to make a statement about what it was that we'd all lost. So getting people to volunteer to do that was the easy part. It was we never ran out of people, and I think that it was such an incredible outpouring of sort of shared grief and support for each other. I think that was something you could really feel on that first day. Just it was very moving.
I understand that on that first day that your heart was the first one that was painted, your heart for your father.
Yeah, it was very much a sort of kind of a bit cloak and dagger about how we were doing. So I travelled down to Brixton the night before to stay at a hostel who were kind enough to help me out, and then grabbed the tube really early in the morning. I think it was probably the first tube from Brixton back to Vauxhall for the morning. And so we all gathered kind of in the, just as dawn was breaking. There's a few of us around. I can't remember the exact numbers, to be honest with you. It was all it was quite exciting, and a bit of an adrenaline buzz about what we were about to do. And this is one of the things that I've always talked about with this. The Led by Donkeys guys, they're expert at this kind of hiding in plain sight sort of thing. So we were very, very well hidden in bright high vis jackets, carrying a big plaque and some sandwich boards that declared this was the National COVID Memorial Wall. And then we, as bold as buttons, walked straight down the Jubilee walkway and sort of got to work. Holly handed me a pen and off I went and did the first heart.
And at that time, did you write a dedication for your father in the heart, or just the heart, plain heart for him?
At the time, I just had the red pen, so I couldn't do the dedication straight away, but I had done the dedication before the end of that first day. Funny enough, it's actually that day, there's another sort of big first about that as well, because it was also the first day that Joe Goodman, who I started the campaign with, who I'd been working with daily for about a year, that was the first day we actually met in person. It was a very strange experience, but a good one. And like I said, talking about how good an experience it was so tranquil and peaceful down there while everybody was like painting the hearts, and We were we were all socially distanced, but we were all there together, and you could get that sort of sense of, like I said, kind of unity and sort of shared support. It was really beautiful.
And have you been since then to visit your father's heart? Do you go see it when you're in London?
I make a point any time that I have to go to London for anything, because I've been down to London more times in the last 3 years than I have in the rest of my life put together. So the amount of like, various things I've gone down to, whether it's to do interviews or to take part in marches or anything else, I always sort of the ritual for me is to get the tube to Vauxhall rather than Westminster, and because then I can walk the full length of the wall every time. I guess a kind of tradition or a habit for me now that I do that every single time. And the thing about it is, even when you know what you're getting in for and you've seen it before, and you still get staggered by it, and I still read there'll be a new dedication that I hadn't seen the time before, like every time. So it's I think it's really important that it's important for me to visit it and do that, and not just to visit my dad's heart, but to see everybody else's, because it's that reminder of what I do and why I do it. But I think it's important that other people have that sort of same experience, and that particularly those in government who are responsible for the amount of hearts that are on there. It's important that they see it as well.
I agree. And the wall, of course, has changed and evolved so much over the last 2 and a bit years since you put that first heart on it, and more hearts are added. What is it that you would hope for the future of the wall?
I think the most important thing is that it's made permanent, and I know that's something that Friends of the Wall have been campaigning for, and it's something that I've thrown myself behind as well. I had a strange experience. I think it was last year, where somebody rang me from a local news outlet near where I was in the UK about a an art piece that was a COVID memorial happening not far from where I live. And the person on the phone said, "Well, how do you feel about this being the first like official COVID memorial that's happening?" And I said, "Well, it isn't." I said the first COVID memorial was the Memorial Wall, which I'm very aware of because I was there when it started, and that is our memorial. That is a memorial for the lost by the bereaved, which I think is the most sort of authentic memorial you can have. So to have that made permanent, I think is probably would be the biggest, I guess, honour towards us that we could hope for. I think it's really important that that's really considered in any sort of commemoration in the future.
I'm very proud when I see how much the wall is now seen around the world. It's often the backdrop in news reports and everything. And even, not only were you so instrumental in starting COVID Bereaved Families for Justice UK, you've been at the COVID inquiry. You recently testified very movingly. And behind you on the wall inside the inquiry room was a picture of the COVID memorial wall, the red hearts. It was
Yeah,
amazing to see.
it is, and like I said, it's because of how sort of raw and authentic that is. That should be the backdrop. That's definitely how the world should see it. And I don't really like to talk about my sort of my involvement in things. I always kind of say that it's down to the organisation and the work that collectively we all do together to be that kind of like widespread. It's a fantastic thing, and it's all down to, like I said, it's down to that collective effort. And I don't think anybody in their right mind can look at what we've done and not realise the outpouring that has created. It's that kind of, yeah, there's just something a little bit different and a bit special about it, and I think that's something that we should all be really proud of.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on it with us and for telling us about that very first heart that went on. And as always, so grateful for everything you do, Matt. Thank
Oh
you.
well, I'm grateful for everything that you do. like I keep saying, this isn't down to just me. This is down to all of us, and every single one of you that has got behind the campaign has been, you know, working through the worst part of your lives. And I'm going to be forever grateful for that, because I couldn't have done this on my own. I would have just been one broken man on his own, wondering how I'd come to this point. But no, we've got just this incredible work that you've all done. You can't talk about the wall without talking about the Friends of the Wall group and all the volunteers that go down every week and continue to maintain it and to add dedications and to update the figures. It's a living memorial, and it's living because the living are there living for it, and I think that's fantastic.
Thank you for those kind words, Matt. As I said at the beginning of this episode, without Joe and Matt, there would be no wall. The volunteers, and I'm sure every person who has a loved one remembered on that wall, are so grateful to them. If you'd like to learn more about COVID Bereaved Families for Justice UK, the organization that Joe and Matt started, visit covidfamiliesforjustice.org. They're doing incredible work, especially regarding the UK COVID inquiry. And with those last two interviews, I think we've pretty much covered the beginnings of the UK COVID Memorial Wall. And of course, you know that our wish, and the wish of everyone we've interviewed so far, has been that the wall should be made permanent. Well, I'm happy to tell you that we're one step closer to having that wish fulfilled. On September 18th, the UK Commission for Commemoration published its recommendations, including one that the memorial wall should be preserved as a national monument. We are so grateful to Baroness Nikki Morgan and the other commissioners for that recommendation. We will continue to fight to ensure that there is no ending to the memorial wall. But the ending referred to in the title of this episode is the ending of this first series of Wall of Grief and Love, the podcast. We've really enjoyed making it, and we'd like to thank you for your kind feedback and for your support. We're in the process of planning Series 2, which will go out in the new year. Again, we'll be telling more stories about the wall, about the people we meet there, about how the wall is being restored, and what it's like to spend a day volunteering there. And of course, we'll be including more personal stories. If there's anything you'd be interested in hearing about or that you'd like us to cover, just message us at the Wall of Grief and Love, and we'll see what we can do. As always, we're so grateful to the people who made this possible by donating their time and talent. I'm thinking especially of the amazing Ross Berman, who does our post-production and who has the patience of a saint, and of Roger Planer and John McBurney, who wrote our beautiful theme music. It still gives me chills every time I hear it. And thank you to all the participants who've let me interview them. I know that for some of them it was a painful experience, but I'm so grateful that they shared their stories. So that's it. We'll see you next year. In the meantime, as always, you can visit us online at nationalcovidmemorialwall.org or follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and Twitter, now known as X. If you have a loved one who died of COVID in the UK and would like a heart to be dedicated to them, message us on our Facebook page, The Wall of Grief and Love, or email us at covidmemorialwall@gmail.com. Till next time. Wall of Grief and Love, the podcast, was written and presented by me, Lorelei King. Today's participants were Joe Goodman and Matt Fowler. Post-production is by Ross Berman, and original music is by Roger Planer and John McBurney. This is a Friends of the Wall production.